Hi, I'm Andy. This is Project Carhaven. Today on the Celica, we'll be rebuilding the brake calipers, fixing up the steering, and doing engine-based stuff. Well, caliper seal kits are actually pretty simple, really. They come with a retaining ring to hold in the dust boot, which is here. Inside of here is a square profile seal. In order to get that out, we need to apply air pressure to the brake line port, push the piston out, and then we can work from there. And it also comes with a cap for the bleed nipple. Oof. Okay, so that's the piston out, torn the dust boot out. Need to grab the retaining ring, get that out, and pick the seal out. And typically inside here, that's going to be pretty filthy and disgusting. That'll need a good clean. The surface of the piston will need to be cleaned up to make it nice and smooth so it doesn't drag or catch or ruin the new seal. And then put it back together. That's the seal. Oh, there's that retaining ring. I'm going to clean all of this out. Alright, so I fitted the dust boot seal to the piston. The retaining ring's on the inside. I'm hoping I can slide that in, squeeze that, and let it clip into place. The new seal needs to have a bit of brake fluid put onto it, give it a bit of lubricant to help it fit into the slot it needs to go into. Okay, try and get this into its home. Tricky. It's gone in, but there's a twist in it, which isn't ideal. Let's see if I can sort that out. Oh, managed to turn it. Bit of lubricant on the piston now. Try and get it to slide in and be happy. Got to be careful not to pierce this new seal. I might have to take that out and flip it, actually. That seal's still in place, so that's good. Let's see if I can get that to go kind of into a spot. And then attempt to fit this in there to hold the boot in place. Well, that looks like it's holding in place to me. It's not popping out. And call that one done. Now it's just a matter of fitting the brake caliper, pads, hoses, clips, then move on to the steering. Some new brake pad springs. These are all the same width. I had to modify these ones because the standard ones are narrower here. If that clears, that should work fine. steering. So, new inner and outer tie rod ends, new fitment arm, which is attached to the steering box. I notice the steering box has a bit of a leak, so I've got a new seal for the bottom of that. Hopefully that'll sort out that issue. And some bushes for the idler arm, which seems to be seized in place at the moment. So I sandblasted the tie rods. It's just a matter of replacing the ends, and they'll be ready to go back in. Next, I've got to get this fitment arm off. 30 mil to get this. I've taken a reference photo, but this seems to be sitting out at an angle towards the driver's side, and I feel like with the steering wheel centered it should be central, so I'm going to set it up like that. If I get it wrong, I can set it back up like this later. I'm waiting for the ping. Oh, it got easier. Either something shifted or it broke something properly. I'm going to have to clean that up to even get close to seeing the seal. Hope it's there. God. Yeah, she leaking. So I got that seal out. It is really bad. I know I damaged it here, but that is just not good. That'll be the reason for the leak, so I'm about to solve that with the new seal. So that new seal's in place on the steering box, and the new fitment arm is fitted. Painted up idler arms fitted, and moves much more freely than it did before. So even though I've got new tie rod ends, the tie rods themselves are no good. One's quite bent and the threads are pretty poor. So I've ordered some new ones. In the meantime, I'm going to put these ones on just so I can get the car back on the ground and move it around. So get this on without dropping it on my head. Hold it in place. Now get the torque wrench, tighten them up. And the torque spec for these is between 36 and 50 foot-pounds. I like aiming for the upper end and then backing the nut off so it lines up with the hole to put the split pin in. That's the connecting rod for the steering fitted. I'm going to put the tie rod ends on and probably just eyeball the alignment because I'm going to end up taking these off again anyway. So as long as it's close enough, it's good enough. Now this is going to be the first time this car's been back down on the ground since I put the suspension in, so it's going to need some time to settle, but hopefully we'll see a difference in the height of the front end. That still looks very high. Well, I don't hate it, but I may need to put those other rear springs in. Well, I'm hoping I just have to undo the shock and drop the rear axle, and then hopefully the springs will come out. Oh, easy. Other side. Where's that insulator? Gotcha. Battery dead. Alright, springs are in. It's just a matter of putting the wheels on and rechecking the ride height. Hopefully it's a bit more even. Alright, so the car's back on the ground and the ride height between front and rear is a bit more even. It is lower than stock, so I'm happy with that. So off camera I have been tinkering around in the engine bay a little bit, been sorting out some wiring, and I realised I need a plan of attack before I move forward. So I need to change these engine mounts, but before throwing in the new ones, I'll probably need to lift the engine up so I can get the sump off, because obviously it's rusty and I hate that. So it's a good opportunity to get it off and give it a clean up and a paint. Also, I'll need to replace the sump gasket anyway. If I'm taking the sump off, then obviously I'll need to drain the oil. So I sort of need to start doing the oil change. So I need to run the car, get the oil warm, drain that, pull the filter off. And the valve cover needs to come off because it's also leaking. I'd like to change the seals that go on the spark plug tubes. It needs to be cleaned up, maybe painted. So there's these holes in the fenders that this side had a grommet and the other side didn't, so I probably need to order 2 of those. Same goes for the brake line grommets that lead out to the front guards. One's missing, this one is rock hard and useless. I do have the grommets for these that I ordered and received a couple of weeks ago, so I'll cover those up. This bushing here is still intact but quite cracked, and I can't find a replacement. So I've got a couple of grommets here that I'm going to combine, which should match the one that's on the accelerator linkage, and replace it. So we've replaced all the soft brake lines, but the clutch line has not yet been done. So I can get that one changed, drain the gross fluid out of there, put fresh stuff in, and also for the first time get some fluid into this brake reservoir, start bleeding the brakes and see if I can get the braking system to actually work. So I guess this is sort of a multi-job, tie up loose ends, engine bay thing. Alright, well I've got to get it running so I can get the oil up to temp so I can drain it out. Yep, still slippery. It smells like fuel though. Just sit the sump plug back in there so I don't lose it and stop oil dripping. Try and get this oil filter off, at least there's decent-ish access. Oh, I'm going to blow something out, like my back end. Got to resort to using a filter removal tool. Oh, even that slipped. Well, when you actually end up breaking your filter removal tool, you're probably having a bad day. Sometimes you have to take drastic measures. Oh, well, it's loose now. There's not really any need for an oil filter to be put on that tight. Just going to spin the new filter on gently and not over tighten it like the last one. Next step, get these engine mounts taken out, or loosened at least. Alright, I've got the engine supported by an engine crane. I've got a worn engine mount and a new one. Now with those engine mounts out of the way, I'm just going to work my way around the sump, get these bolts off, then pull this guy free. This bracket has to come off just to get the sump off. What a pain. Try and pry this thing free. Well, this here is a summary of not great news. In order to get the sump out, I had to drop the sway bar, and the pickup was getting caught on here, so I had to drop that. The oil pump drive sits directly on top, so that fell out as well. And once I got the pan clear, there's sludge. You know, this not good. Just, oh, I wish I hadn't have pulled the sump, but I'm glad I did. There's also some kind of sealant that's been applied and leaked into the pan. I need to clean that out. Ugh, gross. Skipping forward a little bit, the sump's been cleaned, painted. All the sludge has been taken out. All the bolts for the sump have been cleaned. The mating surfaces on the block have been cleaned, ready for the gasket and sump to be refitted. But in order to get the sump back on, the oil pump drive needs to be set up with the two marks aligned up inside the block, so you can't actually see the marks once it's sitting in there. Oil pickup installed to hold the oil pump drive gear. Get the sump somewhat in place, enough to get the drive in, the pickup tube in, while not making a mess with the Permatex gasket maker everywhere while trying to hold that together. Put the bolts back into the pickup while the pan's still hanging loose, and then refit the pan. So that should be a piece of cake. So I'm going to use the Permatex aviation sealant on the pan side of the gasket. I'm going to apply this and let it set up for a few minutes, and then apply it to the pan. Then I'll put some sealant on the other side and then quickly install it onto the car, hopefully. Let's give that a few minutes to set up, and then I'll lay it on the pan. Okay, that's pretty well aligned. I'm going to try and use the setup time on this second application of the gasket sealer to try and get the pickup back in and the sump sort of in the place it needs to be before I bolt it up. First things first, I've got to get around this sway bar. Let's move the gasket, that's not great. Alright, let's try and speed this process up a little bit.
"20 minutes later."
The sump's back on, sway bar's reattached, under shield is also replaced. My most favourite part of that is the fact that I get to say it's done. I don't ever want to have to do that again. So after finding all that sludge in the oil pan, I decided I probably need to run an engine flush through this. I'm going to use this liquid moly engine flush. I got the cheapest oil that I could get to suit the engine and the cheapest oil filter. So that means I've got to take that one off, put this one on, because it's getting thrown straight in the bin once we're done. Yes, I am going to use a funnel to avoid spillage. Because everything's completely cleaned out, I'm going to kick the engine over without the HT lead connected so it won't start, just to get oil back into that pump, up to the head, fill the filter, recheck the level, get the oil level right, then I'll add the engine flush. Alright, ignition lead hooked back up, oil's topped up to the correct level. Okay, runs, add the engine flush. Well, this isn't going to be running long enough to really discolour that oil or burn it, so any discoloration should come from any sludge removal, provided that bottle of magic stuff actually works.
Later.
Well, this is brand new oil, so ideally it should still be a nice golden colour. We'll see if that engine flush actually managed to dislodge any interior grossness. Well, hopefully it was just sludge sitting at the bottom of the pan and not all the way through the engine. Well, it was pretty hard to see, but once the oil was decanted into a container, it was actually pretty dark. So I guess the engine flush did do something. I've replaced the oil and put on the good filter. I think today I'm done now. Down here I'm going to put a video for a build series on a Mercedes that I did. And over there it's going to be a playlist on this car. See you in the next one.